She was already living with the enemy. 12-year-old Cindy overheard a radio plan to ambush a biker charity ride and realized her own stepfather was involved. If she stayed silent, people would get hurt. If she spoke up, she might not make it home. She warned the bikers anyway. Cindy learned to count seconds by the weight of her stepfather's footsteps. Heavy boots on hardwood meant he was in a mood. Slow, deliberate steps meant he was looking for something to be wrong. She'd gotten good at predicting the storms before they hit. Shoulders hunched before he even spoke. Breath held until he passed her bedroom door. At 12, she'd perfected the art of disappearing. Not physically, that would draw attention, but the kind of vanishing where you're so unremarkable that people forget you're in the room. Teachers marked her present and moved on. Classmates knew her name but not her face. Even her mother had stopped asking how her day went, too exhausted from navigating Seth's temper to spare energy for conversation. Home required constant vigilance. School was just noise filling the hours between. But behind old Murphy's junk shop, surrounded by broken electronics and the smell of rust, Cindy could breathe. Murphy never asked questions. He'd watch her dig through bins of circuit boards, pocket tangled wires, stuff cracked cassette players into her backpack. Sometimes he'd grunt and point at the copper pile, and she'd spend 20 minutes sorting wire before disappearing again. Fair trade. She got parts. He got free labor. Neither of them had to pretend it was anything more. Her bedroom was barely big enough for a twin mattress and a dresser, but she'd claimed the closet as her workshop. Inside, wedged between winter coats she'd outgrown, sat her masterpiece. A radio cobbled together from an 80s CB bass, car speaker magnets, and a coffee tin wrapped in stripped wire for an antenna. She'd taught herself soldering from library books, not checking them out, just photographing pages on the school computers during lunch. YouTube tutorials when she could find free Wi-Fi. Trial and error when nothing else worked. At night, when Seth's snoring rattled through the walls like a faulty engine, Cindy would tune through frequencies. Truckers complaining about way stations. Teenagers on walkie-talkies planning meetups. Once, a woman reading poetry to no one in particular, her voice crackling through the static like a ghost. But lately, she'd been listening for something specific. Seth's late-night phone calls in the garage. The way he'd tense when certain cars rolled past. Names he'd drop: Vince, Garrett, the Northside crew. That made him lower his voice. She'd been recording fragments on a chip pulled from a busted smartphone, hidden inside an old tape recorder. It wasn't much yet, but Cindy was patient. Thursday night, while scanning through analog channels, something made her freeze. Male voices, layered with road noise. The Hounds are doing that charity thing Saturday. Through Riverside and down past the industrial zone. Another voice cut in, younger, eager. Vince says we hit them at the overpass. Broad daylight. Send a message. The third laughed. Seth's got the inside track on their schedule. This is easy money. Cindy's hand locked on the frequency dial. Seth. Her Seth. She rewound. Listened again. Scribbled frantically into her notebook. Call signs. Route details. Timing. She sketched a rough map, cross-referenced it with a flyer she'd seen at the library about the Iron Hounds winter coat fundraiser ride. They were planning an ambush, and her stepfather was feeding them information. The Iron Hounds. She'd seen them once, pulling up to her school in a rumble of chrome and leather, hauling bags of winter coats like it was nothing special. Just quiet generosity. One of them had smiled at her when she held the door open. She'd remembered that smile for weeks. Cindy sat in her closet, headphones pressed to her ears, listening to men plot violence against people who'd done nothing wrong. Her hands shook as she filled page after page with notes, frequency logs, estimated distances, every detail she could extract from the static. She'd been practicing invisibility since Seth moved in. Small steps, quiet breathing, forgettable, but sitting there, staring at her notebook full of evidence, Cindy's hands steadied. The familiar weight of fear felt different now. Lighter. She'd spent so long trying to be unnoticed that she'd forgotten she could choose to be seen. She closed the notebook, stared at her bedroom door. The house was silent except for Seth's snoring and the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Tomorrow, she'd walk into a garage full of strangers and tell them their charity ride was about to become a massacre. Cindy skipped her first class. Her mother wouldn't notice. She'd stopped tracking anything beyond Seth's moods and her own survival. The notebook felt like a brick in Cindy's backpack as she walked the 12 blocks to the industrial district, each step heavier than the last. The Iron Hounds garage sat wedged between a shuttered canning factory and a tattoo parlor that never seemed to close. She'd passed it dozens of times, always on the opposite sidewalk, watching men work on bikes and haul donation bags into trucks. Safe distance. Observer mode. The way she'd learned to exist. Not today. The bay door stood open. Inside, motor oil and burnt coffee mixed with the metallic tang of welding. 3 men were dismantling an engine. A 4th worked in the corner, sparks flying from his torch like angry fireflies. Nobody looked up when she stepped inside. She cleared her throat. Once, twice. A guy with a shaved head and forearms covered in ink finally glanced over. "You lost, kid. I need to talk to whoever's in charge." He smirked, exchanged looks with another guy. "About what?" "School project on motorcycle culture. About the ambush you don't know is coming." The welding stopped. The sudden silence felt like pressure against her eardrums. A man emerged from behind a workbench. 50s, gray temples, scar cutting across his jaw like a punctuation mark. His leather vest read Mac, above a patch she didn't recognize. He didn't smile, didn't soften his expression into anything resembling patience. "Talk." Cindy's hands trembled as she pulled out the notebook. She laid it on the nearest flat surface, someone's toolbox, and flipped to the frequency logs. The map came next, then the transcribed conversations, timestamps neat and precise. "Someone's planning to hit your ride tomorrow. I intercepted radio chatter. They know your route. Riverside Overpass, midday, when you're most exposed." Her voice stayed level. She'd practiced this part. One of the younger guys laughed. "Kid's been watching too many cop shows." But Mac picked up the notebook. His eyes moved across the pages, frequency codes, signal triangulation attempts, route analysis sketched in mechanical pencil. His jaw tightened. "Where'd you get this equipment?" "Built it." "From what?" "Junk shop parts. CB base, speaker magnets, coffee tin antenna." She watched his face. "It works. Why bring this here?" The question landed different than she'd expected. Not suspicious. Genuinely curious. "Because you helped kids at my school. Because the men planning this." She swallowed. "One of them lives in my house." The air went still. Even the welding torch seemed to quiet. Mac set the notebook down with careful precision. "Name." "Seth Vance." Someone swore. Another guy stepped closer, staring at Cindy like she'd sprouted a second head. Mac's expression went stone flat. "You're certain?" "I've been recording him since August. I know his voice." Mac pulled out a phone, walked 6 feet away, made 2 calls. The conversations were clipped, coded in language Cindy couldn't follow. When he returned, his eyes had lost their skepticism. He was calculating now, running scenarios. "We're verifying your intel. If you're right, you saved lives today. If you're playing games." He didn't finish. The unspoken threat hung between them. "I'm not wrong." They spent 2 hours cross-checking everything. Mac pulled up old communications training from his service days, traced frequency origins, confirmed transmission patterns. A woman named Denise, lean, sharp-eyed, moves like a boxer, ran logistics analysis, mapping Cindy's route against known problem areas. Every detail checked out. Too perfectly. Another guy, younger than Mac but with the same coiled readiness, studied Cindy while pretending to work on a carburetor. "Where'd you learn radio engineering?" "Library books. YouTube when I could find Wi-Fi." "You teach yourself coding too?" "Enough to get by." He whistled low. Mac shot him a look that shut him up. By noon, they'd rerouted the entire ride, changed schedules, called in extra security. And Cindy was still there because Mac had asked her to stay. Not ordered. Asked. He sat on a workbench across from her, studying the radio diagrams. You built this whole system from salvage? Yeah. Nobody helped you? Nobody knew. Something shifted in his expression. He looked at her differently now, not like a potential threat or a weird kid with a conspiracy theory, like someone he recognized. You eat breakfast this morning? The question caught her off guard. No. Lunch yesterday? She hesitated too long. Max stood, walked to a mini fridge in the corner, came back with a sandwich still in its wrapper and a soda. He set them in front of her without ceremony. Eat. Cindy unwrapped the sandwich, turkey, cheese, lettuce that wasn't even wilted, and tried to eat slowly. Failed. She finished it in 4 bites, washing it down with half the soda before her brain caught up with her stomach. When she looked up, Mac was watching her with an expression she couldn't decode. When's the last time someone made you a meal? Her throat closed. She focused on the can, the condensation pooling on the workbench. Mac leaned back, arms crossed. You flinch every time someone raises their voice. You haven't gone home yet even though school's been out for 3 hours. And you ate that sandwich like you didn't know when the next one was coming. He paused. Seth, part of why you're really here? Cindy's fingers tightened around the soda can. I came because you needed to know about the ambush. That's not what I asked. The garage felt too small suddenly. Too many eyes. Too much attention. She stood, grabbing her backpack. I should go. Cindy. Mac's voice stopped her at the bay door. Tomorrow, during the ride, you're staying here. With us. You're going to help coordinate communications. And after. He met her eyes. After, we're going to talk about what happens next. She wanted to argue. To insist she'd done her part and could disappear back into static and silence. But the sandwich sat warm in her stomach. And Mac looked at her like she mattered. Like what happened to her actually counted for something. Saturday morning came wrapped in fog. Cindy could barely see across the street when she left the house. She showed up at the garage before dawn, backpack heavy with her rebuilt radio and 3 notebooks filled with frequency maps. She'd barely slept. Seth's voice kept looping in her head, that casual tone, discussing ambushes the way most people talked about the weather. The garage had transformed overnight. Folding tables lined one wall, covered in equipment that made Cindy's homemade setup look like a child's toy. Mac was already there, pouring coffee from a dented percolator. He nodded toward the makeshift command center. That's your station. We've got 3 frequencies to monitor, police scanners, our encrypted channels, and the analog bands where you caught the original chatter. He handed her a headset that actually fit. Denise is your co-pilot. She'll handle rider coordination. You focus on threats. Denise appeared with 2 energy drinks and a bagel. Eat first. Think second. We've got 90 minutes before kickoff. Cindy ate mechanically, eyes already scanning the equipment. Someone had integrated her frequency notes into a digital monitoring system. Her coffee tin antenna sat next to a proper ham radio setup, bridged together with adapters she'd only read about in manuals. Whoever wired this understood her makeshift logic well enough to enhance it, not replace it. The riders started arriving at 7. Engines rumbled to life outside, a thunder that rattled the windows. Mac gathered everyone for a brief, explaining the route change without mentioning Cindy by name. We've got credible intel about potential trouble. Stick to the new plan. Stay tight. Watch your mirrors. Just before 9, the convoy rolled out. 23 bikes, for support vehicles, and enough winter coats to outfit 3 schools. Cindy watched through the bay door as they disappeared around the corner, then settled into her chair and pulled on the headset. The first hour was routine. Riders checking in at waypoints. Denise updating positions on a laminated map with dry erase marker. Police scanner reporting normal traffic. Cindy kept one ear on the analog frequencies, waiting for the inevitable moment when the ambush crew realized their targets weren't coming. It happened mid-morning, almost 2 hours into the ride. They're not here. Routes changed. The voice crackled with frustration. Static. Road noise. Then another voice. Deeper. Check the alternate. Vince says they always use Riverside for charity runs. Cindy's fingers flew across a laptop keyboard. She'd found a weakness in the city's traffic management system 2 months ago, outdated security, default passwords nobody had bothered changing. Not legal, definitely not sanctioned. But right now, she didn't care about legality. Traffic camera feeds bloomed across the screen. She scanned intersections along the new route, looking for clusters of vehicles that didn't belong. There, 3 trucks, dark paint, windows tinted, idling near a side road that intersected the convoy's path in exactly 12 minutes. "They're repositioning," Cindy said, keeping her voice level. "Maple and 4th. You've got 10 minutes, maybe less." Denise didn't question it. She keyed the radio. "Lead bike, this is base. Divert at Harrison. Repeat, divert at Harrison. Threat at Maple and 4th. Mac's voice came back steady. "Copy. Splitting formation. Half going parallel on Oak, half looping back through residential." Cindy switched camera views, tracking both groups. The ambush crew sat at the intersection, engines running, waiting for targets that would never arrive. She counted 3 men in the lead truck, could see one checking his phone repeatedly, probably getting increasingly angry texts from whoever was running this operation. Then a police cruiser rolled up behind them. Casual. Routine patrol. Except Cindy knew better. Mac had contacts in the department, people who owed the Hounds favors. The cops approached the trucks, asked questions. Wanted to see registrations. The ambush crew scattered. 2 trucks peeled away before the officers even reached their windows. The 3rd tried to play it cool, but Cindy watched the officer's body language change when he ran the plates. Backup was called. Within minutes, the intersection was lit up with red and blue. The convoy regrouped 6 blocks away, rolled clean into the community center parking lot by noon. Cindy tracked them on the cameras until they were safely inside the building, surrounded by families and kids and the normal chaos of a charity event. She pulled off the headset. Her hands were shaking. Denise squeezed her shoulder. "You did good, kid. Real good." But when Mac walked back into the garage 3 hours later, he looked worried instead of relieved. He sat across from Cindy, who was still at the command station, organizing frequency logs more out of habit than necessity. "Today went perfectly because of you," he said quietly. "The ride was safe. Kids got their coats. Nobody got hurt. That's good. But those men at the intersection? They're going to figure out someone burned them. And Seth's going to hear about it." Mac leaned forward. "When's the last time you felt safe in your own house?" The question made her chest tighten. Her breathing went shallow. Cindy stared at her hands. "I manage." "That's not what I asked." His voice stayed gentle, which somehow made it worse. "You flinch when doors slam. You stayed here until dark yesterday. You're good at reading frequencies, but I'm good at reading people. And you're scared. He doesn't know I was involved." "You sure about that?" "Because desperate men do desperate things when their plans fall apart. And if Seth's connected to this crew, I don't have anywhere else to go." Mac was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the mini-fridge, came back with another soda. Set it in front of her like a peace offering. "Yeah," he said finally. "You do." The arrests happened on Monday. Cindy was in her room, headphones on but not listening to anything, when she heard the sirens. She moved to the window just as 2 patrol cars pulled into the driveway, their lights painting the neighborhood in alternating red and blue. Seth came out fighting, shouting about rights and lawyers and how this was all a mistake. The neighbors gathered on their porches, phones out, recording everything. Cindy watched her stepfather get pressed against a police car, handcuffed, still yelling even as they read him his rights. She couldn't process what she felt. Relief, maybe, or just exhaustion. Her body knew before her mind did. Her shoulders dropped, her jaw unclenched. The men from the intersection had given up names under pressure. Phone records connected Seth to Vince, to Garrett, to the whole network. Financial transactions showed payments for consulting, code for selling information about charity routes and security gaps. And there was an anonymous tip, delivered through channels the police wouldn't question, containing audio recordings that sealed everything shut. Cindy never told her mother she'd made that call. Didn't explain the chip hidden in the tape recorder, the months of documentation, the careful editing to remove her own presence from the recordings. She pulled back, looked at her mother's face, older than she remembered, worn down by years of walking on eggshells. "You're here now," Cindy said quietly. "That's what matters. I should have left him sooner. I should have protected you." Cindy didn't know what to say to that, so she just held on. Child Services arrived on Wednesday. A caseworker named Patricia with kind eyes and a briefcase full of forms. She asked careful questions in a gentle voice, documenting bruises Cindy had learned to hide in fear she'd learned to carry like extra weight. There was talk of temporary placement, evaluations, a path forward that felt more like a maze. But Mac made calls. Denise contacted a nonprofit lawyer she knew from her previous work with domestic violence shelters. Within 2 weeks, things started moving. A lawyer, an apartment across town, a job interview with a company that worked with the Hounds network. The apartment was small but clean. The walls were intact. Her mother could speak without measuring every word first. Cindy's mother cried when she signed the lease, and this time it wasn't from fear. The garage became Cindy's second home officially after Mac cleared out a corner workspace and installed a proper workbench. He showed up one Saturday with a box of electronics. Not junk shop salvage, but actual functioning components still in packaging. "Figured you'd want real parts for once," he said, setting the box down with exaggerated care. "No more coffee tin antennas." Cindy stared at resistors, capacitors, breadboards, wire strippers still wrapped in plastic. Her throat went tight. "I can't pay for this." "Good thing I'm not asking you to." Mac pulled up a stool. "Here's the deal. You help us maintain communications equipment, teach some of the younger guys basic electronics, and this space is yours. Fair trade." She built her first legitimate radio that afternoon. No guesswork. No substitutions. Just clean engineering and components that actually matched the circuit diagrams. When she powered it on and heard clear audio across multiple frequencies, something in her chest unlocked. Denise started teaching her about encrypted communications. Proper security protocols, not just backdoor exploits and default passwords. Samara, a former aerospace engineer who'd retired to work on bikes, showed her coding that actually scaled beyond quick hacks. The workshops started small. 3 kids from the neighborhood, referred by a youth counselor who knew Mac. Cindy taught them to solder small pieces, to read circuit diagrams, to see potential in broken things. The workshops grew faster than expected. 8 students became the norm within weeks. Before long, they'd claimed half the garage, Tuesday and Thursday evenings reserved for them. Some kids came from homes like hers. Others just needed somewhere to belong. Cindy never asked why they showed up. She just handed them tools and showed them what became possible when you stopped waiting for permission to build something better. A local news crew appeared one afternoon, filming a piece about the Hounds' youth outreach. The reporter was young, enthusiastic, asking questions about inspiration and community impact. She cornered Cindy while she was helping a younger student troubleshoot a short circuit. "What made you want to get involved with this program?" Cindy looked at the half-built radio in front of her student, the garage full of people who'd chosen to show up, the world she'd accidentally helped create. She thought about that night with the coffee tin antenna, scanning through static for something worth holding on to. "I wasn't trying to be a hero," she said, adjusting a wire on the breadboard. "I was just trying to survive. Turns out sometimes that's the same thing." The reporter smiled, satisfied with her soundbite. The camera panned to other students, other projects. But Mac, standing near the bay door, caught Cindy's eye and nodded once, understanding passing between them without words. That evening, after the students left and the garage grew quiet, Cindy sat at her workbench building a new tracking system for the charity convoys. Her hands moved with confidence now, no longer shaking when she reached for components. The radio played low in the background, classic rock, not intercepted conversations. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother asking what she wanted for dinner. Simple, normal, the kind of question that used to feel like a luxury. Cindy smiled and typed back a reply. Then she returned to her circuit board, soldering connections that would hold, building systems designed to last. Outside, Engines rumbled as riders returned from an evening run. Someone laughed. Music drifted from the tattoo parlor next door. The world continued spinning, full of noise and static and frequencies waiting to be discovered. But now, Cindy wasn't just listening anymore. She was home. Cindy didn't wait for someone to rescue her. She built her own way out, one broken radio at a time. What would you do if you had the power to stop something terrible? But speaking up meant risking everything. Drop your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, share it. Someone out there might need to hear it. See you in our next video.